Opened in 1909, the Russell Senate Office Building's Caucus Room has witnessed many notable Senate investigations. In this second of a two-part program, Senate historian Don Ritchie tells us about hearings held from the 1940s to the present day, including the 1954 Army McCarthy hearings and the Watergate investigation.
People come into this room all the time now. It's used for lunches, it's used for receptions, it's used for lectures, meetings, awards ceremonies, announcements, all sorts of things happen here. It's a grand room. It's just a wonderful setting, and immediately people are impressed by the dimensions of the room, by the wonderful carvings and the fixtures that are here, the great chandeliers, and the history. There's even a plaque on the wall that lists the famous events that took place in this room. Television came along in 1947. The first televised hearing was General George Marshall testifying before the Foreign Relations Committee. And this had to deal with American foreign policy. He was Secretary of State at the time, and the Marshall Plan was one of the big issues of the day.
Europe is still emerging from the devastation and dislocation of the most destructive war in history. Within its own resources, Europe cannot achieve, within a reasonable time, economic stability. The solution would be much easier, of course, if all the nations of Europe were cooperating, but they are not.
And then in 1953, Senator Joseph McCarthy of Wisconsin became the chairman of the old Truman Committee, the permanent subcommittee on investigations. And he was looking around to hire a chief counsel. And he had some more senior people, some people who with some decent reputations, people like John Sirica, who later became a judge in the Watergate case. He looked at Robert Kennedy as a possible counsel, but instead he hired Roy Cohn, who was a prosecutor from New York and who'd worked in the Justice Department. And this was a big mistake because McCarthy needed somebody to slow him down. He sometimes would lose control, and he needed a mature force. And Cohn was very young and a totally ruthless person, and egged McCarthy on and brought out his worst excesses. It's very interesting. I've done a lot of oral histories with people who worked here at the time. And McCarthy has sort of a very villainous image in the history books. Almost all the people who worked for him really liked Joe McCarthy. He was a very nice guy. He was the only senator who gave one of the staff a Christmas present, for instance. He was the kind of person who went out of his way to help people. He was always lending money to the Capitol Police. He was sort of a hail fellow, well met. But when he would get before the TV cameras, there was a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and he just, a different side of his personality came out, sort of shocked the people who liked him.
Mr. Symington, I think, and I'm glad we're on television, I think the millions of people can see how low that a man can sink. I repeat, they can see how low an alleged man can sink.
And then when the cameras were turned off, he could walk out the door and throw his arm around the person that he just attacked on the floor. He was a very odd person in a lot of ways.
Don't pull that phony thing on me.
The letter. There it is, Senator. Got my signature on it.
You have a document with false statements in it. I will not sign and agree that's true. Now don't. You're not fooling anyone. You're not fooling anyone, Mr. Symington. You're not fooling anyone. I have offered to go before any committee, do anything you ask.
You've been watching a preview of our weekly half-hour American Artifacts program. Visit cspan.org/history for schedule information and to view entire programs online.